Welcome everybody. I am George Frudes with the Kittitas County Chamber of Commerce, and we'd just like to welcome you today and thank you all for coming to our October Lunch and Learn. We are very excited about this series of events for professional and business development that we will be having monthly. Today our speaker is Sheri with Swiftwater Marketing, and she will cover the topics of digital marketing and the strategies to use to get the most effective bang for your buck out of using websites and social media. So please welcome Sheri.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming today. I know sometimes it can be hard to get away from your really super busy jobs and life and all that stuff, so it's good for you for taking a little time out of your day to learn, maybe learn something new or enhance a skill that you already have. My objective for today is to really give you sort of a framework for what is included in a digital marketing strategy. As you can imagine, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things that might apply to your business, might be really important, other things that, you know, maybe not so much. So what I want to do is really start with an understanding of kind of where you're at with your business. And so I want to start with thinking about your company, and with this sort of little continuum that I've got. On the one end, we have sort of our small, local, brick and mortar. Think of a store or a shop. Maybe it's a restaurant, maybe it's a bakery, anything like that. And the idea is that you're focused mostly on a geographic area around your business. You're relying on people to walk in the door and purchase from you, okay? And so then on the other end of that spectrum would be sort of the opposite of that, which would be like an e-commerce company. Maybe you sell t-shirts online, and you don't even have a physical location. Everything you do is on the internet. And as you can imagine, the digital marketing needs for these two companies are probably pretty drastically different. So what I'd like you to do is kind of think about, well, where do I fall on that line? And I'm kind of thinking, but I don't want to make the mistake of assuming that maybe most of the people are in that middle towards the blue side. Kind of a show of hands of people that kind of feel like they fit in that more of a local, small local business as opposed to e-commerce. Anyone that's just e-commerce? Okay. All right, so as we kind of go along and talk about the different aspects of this and the different strategies, we'll kind of talk about where you might fit in. Okay. So let's jump in. What I want to do to start is really define some of the aspects that make up a digital marketing strategy. And the way I like to look at it is, on the one side you have I like to use the word assets. It's sort of the engine behind your strategy. It's the things that you either need to create and manage. And then on the other side is your activities, okay? So it's the things that you're going to be actually doing, okay? Does that make sense? Got everybody on board with me? Okay, so we're not gonna go into a lot of detail on all of these. We are gonna go into some detail on brand identity, website, and social media. Those are the three that we're gonna kind of spend most of our time on today. But I do want to take a minute and define some of these, so you'll at least have an idea of where they fit into the total strategy. So brand identity is where we're gonna start. So I'm gonna kind of skip over that for right now. Content is something that, as you incorporate a digital marketing strategy, you're going to want to think of ways that you can add value to your consumer, okay? And we do that through content. And it's also something we'll talk about when we are talking about a really good website. So probably the best example of digital content would be a blog. Does everyone know what that is? Okay, so it's a really great way to add value to your consumers and enhance your website sort of at the same time. And you're giving them information that they need to maybe solve a pain point in their life, okay? So we'll come back to that a little bit later. Optimized website is between brand identity and optimized website. Those are the two places that you really need to start, because before you jump out into the activities of a digital marketing strategy, you want your foundation to be really good, okay? So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then on the activity side, social media is probably the one that most people, when you think of digital marketing, I think social media is the one people kind of jump to first. I know when I bring up the subject of digital media, people will often say, oh, you mean being on Facebook or Instagram. So while that's definitely a piece of it, it's not the whole thing, okay? Email is another activity within a digital marketing strategy. And we're not gonna go into a lot of detail on that one today, but what I wanna say is that's something you wanna think about as your sort of ultimate goal to get to, is to be able to actually have email addresses for the people that have raised their hand and said, hey, I'm interested in your company. I wanna know more about what you do, what you offer, what you sell. So when you can collect those email addresses, think of that as gold. So once you get that really good list, then you'll want to get more into email marketing strategy. But it's a little bit more advanced, and so we're gonna focus on the getting started steps, and that's why we're not gonna go into a lot of detail on that. The other one we're not gonna go into a lot of detail on, but again, I wanted to mention it because it's part of the strategy, is paid online advertising. Does everyone know what that is? You know, when you Google something like, let's say you need a new fireplace, and you Google fireplaces, and maybe the first 2 or 3 companies that pop up, they have the little word ad next to them. Someone paid money to Google to get your eyeballs to look at their ad because you typed in that you wanted a fireplace. So that could be a strategy for you. And then I also kind of lump in there paid social media. So if you're boosting or actually running ads on social media, that's another way of spending money on your strategy. So I don't know, that's a tough one. It kind of falls into social media and paid online advertising. You could kind of put it into either both. So any questions on any of these aspects at this point? No. Okay. And then the last thing that is part of a really good digital marketing strategy would be analytics. And this is something that you might need to take a little time to learn about if you're going to be sort of managing your own digital marketing strategy. But the beauty of digital marketing is that you have access to the analytics or how people are interacting with what you're putting out there online. You know, if you run an ad in a magazine, for example, or you put a flyer in a window, you might get a really good success rate. You might have more business, you might have more people attend your event, but you really don't know how or why they're there, right? Because there's no way to know how many people opened that magazine or how many people walked by that flyer. But with a digital marketing strategy, the analytics are what's, to me, one of the best parts about it, is you can literally look at what people are interacting with, what's working. you can change what isn't working at a moment's notice and really make sure that the way you're spending your time is most profitable for your business. Okay, so I want to start with brand identity, because really before you jump out there into a digital marketing strategy, you want to make sure that your brand is really solid. And there are two aspects of a brand, two basic aspects. One is the visual, I like to call them the visual attributes. That's your logo, your font, the colors, anything, I always look at it, anything you could print or look at visually. So it could be your website, it could be your social media page, and if you're doing print advertising, could include your print advertising. So the key with this part of your brand is consistency, cohesiveness, and really simplicity. If you look at the most iconic brands, you know, Amazon, Nordstrom, Coca-Cola, Ford, I mean, the list goes on and on. Their logos and their branding, their visual brand, is actually quite simple, okay? They don't have overly complicated logos. It's very easy, cohesive. So if you're starting from scratch with a logo, that's the first thing I always talk about is how can we pare this down and keep it really, really simple? Because it's hard enough to get noticed, especially as a small business. And if you have a really complicated visual brand, it just makes it harder. So make sure that you have your visual brand ready to go. And then the intangible attributes, that's your reputation, your the value that you bring to your customers. And personality is kind of, in some ways, a little bit new, a new concept for people. But as you start to jump into social media, you suddenly will create this personality for your business. So you want to make sure you've given that some thought. And for all of these things, you want to think about your ideal target customer. Okay, you don't want to build your brand around what you like. You need to step out and look at, well, who are the people most likely to buy from me, and what will resonate with them. Okay. But yeah, go ahead.
On a font, what is it? You know, like the fonts change a lot.
Mm-hmm.
What's like a good font to always use usually in branding?
Well, you know, it's a difficult question to answer, because like anything with your visual, it has to do with your company. So if your company is you know, very high-end, you want a very simple, sleek font. And if it's more of a playful company, you're gonna want a you know, maybe more scripted or playful font. So it's difficult to just give you a list of fonts. It's really important to look at what you're trying to accomplish. Yeah, good question though. Okay, any other questions on brand before we move on? How many of you feel like you've got your brand kind of under control and you're ready to skip through this? Okay, good. Okay, so website. Your website is really, I mentioned this before, it's the foundation of your digital strategy. What you're trying to get people to do with digital media is get them to come to your website, because that's where you control the message. And if you think about social media, one of the scariest parts is when you get out there is suddenly you've given this public voice to everyone who interacts with you. And actually that's one of the reasons I encourage you to make sure your brand is under control, because the last thing you want is to jump out on social media if people think that you're overpriced, your service isn't good, you know, they already have a negative impression. Boy, once they get on social media, they're gonna go crazy with their comments, and that's the last thing that you want. So, you wanna make sure that you've got that under control. But website is the foundation. That's step two, I guess. If you look at getting your brand secure, then step two would be a website. Couple of things about a website that are important. And, you know, one of the most important things, I think, and I put it up there on top, number one, is responsiveness. And having a responsive website, what that means is your website responds to the device that the user is using, okay? So if they're using a tablet, they're using a phone, if they're using a laptop, what are they using to view your website? So if you look at this example, this is Nordstrom's website, and no matter if you look on a computer or you look on a phone, they're very similar, but what happens is they pare out some of the detail and they make it really easy. And so the last thing you want is someone on their phone looking up your website, and if you have this experience where it's not responsive, and so you're having to manipulate on the phone to be able to read things, so you've gotta increase the font size and then move everything over, that's the last thing that you want. Especially now, more and more people are accessing websites and shopping on their phones. So having a responsive website is critical, yeah.
So who would you go to help to make your website more responsive to different devices?
Well, you would go to whoever did the website in the first place.
Let's say I used Wix
Okay,
and did my own website.
okay, and it's not responsive?
So I don't use it very often.
Okay.
But I don't know, I haven't looked at it on the phone for a while, so.
Well, and
Do they automatically usually do that?
I would think that a Wix website should.
Okay.
Websites are like any technology, and think about how often you replace your phone, or you replace your laptop. They do have a bit of a shelf life, especially if they were custom designed. And so you started with a blank screen, and you hired someone to do all the coding and everything. At some point, that system that they used is going to outlive its shelf life. The nice thing about using like a Wix or a Squarespace or one of those is they tend to constantly upgrade, and so then you're kind of ahead of the curve on that. But, if you had a website that's, you know, more than say 3 years old, you really want to take a close look at it, especially for responsiveness, and you can literally just pull up your website on your phone and see how easy it is to use. So design of your website, of course, is important as well. You want to make sure that it's focused on your target audience again. It speaks to them. It's consistent with your brand, right? So if your brand is red, white, and blue, your website should not be earth tones. You always want this cohesiveness throughout all of the aspects of your marketing. And then it's easy to use or easy to navigate, and that's really critical. You want to make sure that people, when they go on your website, can easily find what they're most likely looking for, and have a really easy way to contact you. That should be a big button right on the front, is how to get a hold of you, because that's probably one of the main reasons they're accessing your website, is just to get a hold of you. So really important. A strong call to action. You want to tell your visitors what it is you want them to do once they get to your website. Don't leave it up to them to kind of figure out. You know, if you've got a sale going, if you want them to join your newsletter, You know, whatever your call to action is, make sure it's right there, right off the top. And absolutely have an email sign up. Absolutely. Even if you're not using it quite yet, or you're not quite ready for it, it's never too early to start gathering those email addresses. So that's critical. Again, we talked a little bit about analytics. You want to make sure that you've registered your site with Google. And a lot of this stuff will be done by the person who does your website. So don't be too concerned about that. But you need to make sure that you are learning how to use the analytics. And you take some time, and it doesn't, it could be maybe a couple hours or even an hour a month that you sit down and really look through the analytics of your website. And make sure you don't have broken links or, anything that's causing your website to not work properly or at its best. Okay, and adhere to SEO, best practices. Does anyone know what SEO stands for?
Search engine optimization.
That's right. Yep, and what that means is when people go to Google or Bing and they type something in that they're searching for, how well is your website performing if it perfectly matches what they're looking for, okay? So I don't wanna get into the weeds on this topic because for the most part, the person doing your website is going to be doing the SEO. But it's a great conversation to have with them and say, hey, what practices do you use to make sure my website is coming up? But there are a couple that I think everyone should think about and know about that are things that you can do as the business owner that don't really require you to be coding your own website or anything like that. Number one is fresh content. And we talked about content in the beginning. Google loves fresh content. When someone types in a search criteria, the Google goes in and tries to figure out, they want to give that user the best options possible. And one of their criteria is, if there's fresh content on there, this must be a really good website, I'm gonna pull that one up, okay? As opposed to a website that was built 3 years ago and not one word has changed, okay? So again, a blog is a great way to do that. You can do it with video. There's all kinds of strategies. Obviously, some companies, content is easier. For a blog is something I use because, it's easy for me to write something and put it out there that would be valuable to the people that come to my website. There are others, maybe a salon or a restaurant, it might be a little bit more difficult. I know of a wine bar in Kent. What they do for content is every month they have a different wine maker come in and they do a video about the wine and they post that on their website. So that you just need to get creative if doing a blog doesn't make sense for your company. Okay? So fresh content is really good. Number two, if you're drawing from a local area, like on that first slide, we talked about the blue side of the continuum. You're a brick and mortar, you're pulling from people in Ellensburg, maybe a little bit outside. You absolutely have to have your address, phone number, and if you can, an actual map on there, okay? So if someone's typing in, our example earlier was, I'm shopping for fireplaces. Well, what if they type in fireplaces in Ellensburg? Well, that's a whole different search. And if you are a fireplace shop in Ellensburg, well, you want to make sure that you pull up, right? So having your company name, address, phone, and a map is a really good way to make sure that that happens. Another good thing to do for local businesses is to register with Google. And you can do that at google.com/business. Super easy to do. They will send you a card in the mail to verify that that's really your address. And then what happens, takes a few days, but you notice sometimes when you type in a certain website, this information comes up. That's mine. So if you type in, you know, Swiftwater Marketing, that's gonna come up on the side and it'll tell you the address and the phone number and all this great information. So super easy to do. Just go ahead and get registered on Google.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Excuse me. If the link is broken on your website and the link is attached to a local media source or radio station, who's the best person to get that taken care of? Directly at the radio station or back to the developer?
I'm not sure I follow exactly. I would say to start with the person who is managing your website, who developed your website. Are you saying that, oh, I see, so you've got a link to an outgoing link and that's broken?
Right, it's no longer, content is no longer found, excuse me.
Yeah, I would have the person that did your website can go in and either remove it or fix it.
Okay.
And update it. But yeah, broken links are something that you wanna stay on top of. Constantly be going through your website and making sure any links that you have are working. That's really, really important.
And secure too.
And secure too. Okay, so let's jump in and talk a little bit about social media. So we've been kind of focused so far on that part of the digital marketing strategy that I like to call, you know, the assets, the things that you create and then you're going to sort of launch out there to the world. So that's your brand, your content, and your website, okay? So you've got those, you're ready to go. A lot of people then, the next step is to kind of jump out there on social media. And we'll talk a little bit about some best practices, but before we do, I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about the sort of the most popular, I guess, trending social media sites, the ones that you're most likely to at least start with. But again, like everything else, it comes down to your target audience, okay? So rather than thinking about, well, which social media channels do I like, you wanna think about which social media channels your customers are most likely to be on, okay? And this is interesting, and I never know if people are aware of this, but do you know that Facebook actually owns Instagram? Most people know that, okay. So it's really interesting to me as I start to see Instagram evolve, how much similarity there starts to be between the two of them and things that they're doing. And if you're not aware of that, it's like, wait a minute, are they stealing that from Facebook? How can they do that? But yeah, they're actually owned by the same. So just a couple things to think about with the different channels. Instagram is a very visual experience. It's really based on a photo. That's the first thing that happens is you post a photo and then you put some information about the photo. So it's very visual. It's a great way to enhance your branding in that intangible side of your brand that we talked about earlier. Your personality, things like that, your service, really good for that. It tends to attract a younger audience, and that's, social media tends to be that way. As a new channel comes on, it's typically embraced, you know, by a younger audience first, and then kind of makes its way along the channel. So right now, that one tends to be a little bit more of a younger audience. So again, thinking about who your target audience is. Facebook, I think Facebook, one of the things that I like about it for business is a really great way to share information. So if you're wanting to share a newsletter or a blog or a calendar or an event, things like that. That's a great way to do that. Facebook is sort of made for that kind of sharing. Tends to be a little bit of an older demographic. So if that's your target audience, then that's a great way to go. I mean, the last thing you want to do is to take on a social media channel and then have absolutely none of your target audiences on that channel. Because even though, for the most part, these activities are free for you, your time is not free. So you don't want to be spending a lot of time on investing in posting and things like that if it's not getting noticed. And you also have the ability to use analytics through the different channels. So Facebook has its own analytics, Instagram has its own analytics. So you want to make sure that if you're investing the time, that you're also taking the time to make sure that what you're doing is valuable. And the other thing I like to point out with Facebook is it does have a little bit of a pay-to-play model. And what that means is if you have a business page, let's say you have 200 people that like your business page, and you post something on that page. All 200 of those people are not going to see your post. Facebook says, yeah, I'm gonna send that out to a few people that like your page, but if you would like more people to see this, then we're gonna need to boost your post. So you're gonna be spending $2, $5. It's not a lot of money, but it can add up. But that's really something you need to think about, is especially if you're not wanting to invest in social media, that not everyone will see your post. Okay? Yep.
So how do you set that up?
The
To pay to-
boosting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's within the admin section of your page. So once you have your page set up, you'll see when you're in that section that you can, register a credit card and you can boost your post. So it's all on the admin.
So it's just a few dollars a month?
No,
Or per person that you
well, you
boost it to?
set actually like a daily budget. So you say, I wanna spend $5. And it all depends on how much that will get you. I mean, it's just individual, you'd have to kind of sit down and look at it, but. Yeah, so it's something to think about, because a lot of people think that, well, if I have all these people that like my page and I do a post, they're all gonna see it, and it's not quite the way it works, so. Twitter is another one that's, very popular. It's a little bit difficult to conquer. It's the ones that are really the most successful at Twitter really get their target audience. And it tends to be really popular with big brands. Like Wendy's is amazing on Twitter. So if you want to take a look at a company that really understands Twitter, follow Wendy's restaurants. They're really, really good at it. Requires really daily posting, very active. So if you're thinking I'm gonna post, once or twice a week or something like that, Twitter might not be the best channel for you. Okay, so we're gonna continue to talk about social media. So if you've got questions kind of in there, but I want to talk about your goal with social media. What are you really trying to accomplish with it? Because it's really important, like anything else, when you start an advertising campaign or strategy, you need to think about, what am I trying to accomplish? And what social media is really good at is enhancing your brand, building customer confidence and trust, staying top of mind, so you're kind of trickling on them, right? So they're on their phone, oop, there's another post, you're just constantly staying right there, and they remember you. So when they do want to go buy something that you. you offer, you're gonna be the first one they think of, okay? Another aspect of social media that's really good that I think a lot of people don't really think about is attracting employees. So while you're enhancing your brand awareness, what you're also doing is you're really showing what you're all about as a company. And so if there's people out there that are looking for a job, you know, they might see your social media and think, wow, that looks like a really cool place to work. That looks like, I think I could fit in there really well. So it's a great way to attract employees. And then obviously you wouldn't be doing it if you weren't interested in boosting your sales. But what's interesting is the sales part of it tends to come a little bit later. It's through all these other activities that people then trust you, know you, like you, because they're following your social media. And when they have a need for your services, then they'll come and spend money with you. It's not really that sort of immediate reaction where you post, hey, I've got grilled cheese sandwiches on sale today for $2. It's our special, come on down and have one. I see that a lot with smaller businesses sort of trying to use it that way, but that's not really your best bet to get people. You want to be posting 80% of your posts need to be more focused on enhancing your brand and providing value to the people looking at your social media. And once you've sort of engaged with them and they like and trust you, then you can kind of slip in some sales. So I like to look at an 80-20 model. So you're 80% focused on just providing great content and great photos and being engaging, and then 20% on, you know, I've got a Labor Day weekend sale going, come on down, right? So if you flip those two, people will stop following you. Because think about how you like to look at social media. And if you've got a company that you like and you follow, and all they ever post is come and buy, come and buy, come and buy, you're gonna lose interest in them, okay? So kind of try to think about that 80-20 rule. Okay, so a few tips for social media. Number one, create a business page. You do not want to be posting about your business on your social or your personal page. Because think about the people that like your personal page. They're all over the country. It's your aunt and uncle. It's your friends. You know, it's great to let them know that you have a business page, but you really, really need to have a separate business page. You want to be, this next one is interesting because it almost feels like I'm going against what I just said, but being personal. You want to be personal, but professional. But you want to create this personality. People like to buy from people, right? And the more you can showcase yourself on social media as having a personality, you have people behind your business, the more likely they are going to feel confident and comfortable with you as a business. So you want to be constantly telling a story and being personal. I love behind the scenes social media posts. And one channel company I love following in Cle Elum is the Cle Elum Bakery. So if you're on Instagram, they have a great page, and recently they were doing some behind the scenes, you know, when they're baking stuff, and they had you know, you could see it and it was fast. It would go through the whole thing really quickly, and it was really cool. So that's a really good example of taking a company like a bakery and showing its personal side. So that's a really cool one to follow if you want to sort of see, how to do it, and their photos are beautiful. And what's interesting to me is I don't really buy a lot of baked goods, but I follow them, cause I think they do Instagram really well. And I'll tell you, they are top of mind for me. So if I ever do need baked goods for some reason, that's where I'm gonna go, cause that's immediately who I'm gonna think of. Okay.
I do have a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what if you're like putting stuff on, say, Facebook or Instagram, and then somebody shares, you know, your information, like kind of like boosts, like forwards it onto their page? Is that good, or?
Yeah, that's
Oh, yeah.
absolutely good. Yeah.
Well, but depending on the person, because sometimes you notice that people just post way too much stuff and then people and stuff.
I wouldn't worry
Okay.
about that. Yeah, no, the more you can get people to engage and interact with
Okay.
your posts, the better.
Okay.
The more people, what Facebook, the way they work is it's kind of like Google, looking for, well, which are the best websites, to come up on this search. It's the same thing with social media, is Facebook says, wow, people really like this post, I'm gonna send it out to more people.
Do you wanna like it, or do you wanna like heart it, you know, like how they have all that stuff, I'm like, what is the best way?
Yeah, you know, the little hearts and things like that are the
Well, you know, the one you can just
best.
do, the one where you hit the little thumbs up, or the
Yeah.
there's the like, and
Yeah.
your smiley face, I mean, which do people mostly go for?
I don't know.
Okay.
I
I
you
like
know,
everything.
yeah,
What do you-
getting people to like your
Okay.
things, or to pick one of those, like the heart or the
Yeah.
smiley face. That's
Okay.
that's kind of what you want.
So whichever one you pick, it's gonna have the same results?
Yeah, yeah. But Facebook does not want you to tell people to do that.
Right.
They really, really don't wanna see that. They don't want you to say, share this or like this or things like that. It's really funny. I mean, figuring them out, the minute you figure them out, they change,
Yep.
so, it's a lot of trial and error.
So do they penalize you if you do that? Because there's a lot of posts that I say, that say, share this, or please like this.
Yeah.
So do they
That
penalize
was
the
very
person that likes it?
popular in the beginning, and again, Facebook starts to figure things out, and they don't wanna see that so much. They want the post to be shared and liked organically, because it's good, not because you're begging everyone you know to share it. So, hard to say, exactly how that would penalize you, but your best bet is to have really great content that people are inspired to share. And then you don't need to tell them to share it. Okay, so this is a big one. This is kind of my pet peeve, but keeping your posts on your business page professional. And it's kind of that fine line, because we talked about you want to have a personality, but you also need to stay professional. So that's why I like to see people have 2 pages, because, if your kid's graduating from high school and you just really want to post that out there, post that on your personal page. Don't post that on your business page. Pets, all that kind of stuff. There just needs to be that separation. Okay. So you want to try to incorporate the 3 Ps. This is kind of a summary, but you want to be personal, have a personal voice, but on a business topic. Okay. Have a reason for your post, and always try to think, how can I add value? Okay, so that's really what you're trying to do. The more value you add to people, the more they will trust and like you and feel confident with you as a business. And then last is promotion, which is that 20% where you can offer something, or, suggest people come in and see you for a special or whatever. But you just really don't want to stay in that area. Okay, and then absolutely include your branding, your logo, your colors, all of that stuff. Absolutely include it, as long as you have it cohesive and you're using the right fonts, you've got your brand, you've got all your pieces that you can use, so, but definitely use your branding. Okay, so getting started strategy here. And this is just a little bit of a wrap up, but number one, take a look at your brand. Make sure it's as good as it can be. Make sure you have access to your logo. You know what your fonts are, your colors, all of that stuff. If your color is blue, know what blue it is. Don't use whatever blue happens, you know, you're working on your computer and yeah, it might be that blue, I'm not really sure. Know what your blue is, okay? Be simple, consistent, cohesive. That's just the critical things about your brand. Then the next, you wanna tackle your website with your brand in mind, but you wanna make sure that you've got a current website, responsive, you've got all the SEO. You really wanna take time on this because all this work you're gonna do on the social media side, if your website is below par, it's going to be a waste of time because people might see your social media and they don't have a need for your business until maybe a month later and they're, oh, what was that company? You know, and they try to find you online, but your SEO is a disaster and so your website's not coming up, okay? So you can kind of see, you wanna take the time to get those two right before you jump into all the other things. Content, trying to come up with creative ways to add valuable content. And there's a lot of different things to do, but if you're just getting started with content, the question to ask yourself is, what is my customer's pain point? What can I solve for them? And that's a great place to start when you're putting together a content piece. And then, of course, jumping into social media, you want to be engaging with your customers, you're building your brand awareness, and of course sharing content with the ultimate goal of boosting or increasing your sales. And then analyze, how's this working? What can I change? What do I need to change? So really getting involved with the analytics is important. So that's kind of, you know, the whole strategy to get started. And that brings us to the end. So we can see if there's any questions.
Hi, one.
Yeah.
So if we decide to take on our own website and not use a company to do it for us.
Yep.
How do you make sure that your search engine optimization stays active?
Well, you really need to look at the whoever you're doing your website through, and they will offer you